So Nathan, are you there?
I'm there. Can you hear me, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely loud and clear.
Perfect, perfect. You know what? I thought I was never ever going to get on. I don't know why you've put me on after Simon Zucchi. Tough man to follow, and I'm already 10 minutes into my presentation, so let's go.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, what we do is we'll go straight into that one. Yeah, I apologise. I thought, shall we tell him to stop? But no, it's
No, you
pure bonus
can't.
we're putting
You
out here.
can't tell the man, the myth, the legend to stop, mate. You've got to let him. You've got to let him go.
Yeah, absolutely. What we'll do is, if you've got a presentation or a
I have,
presentation
yeah.
to
Well,
show.
I've scrambled it together last night. I was going to just completely wing the entire thing, but then I started watching some of it when Alice, invited me in, and I thought I can't. I'm dangerously underprepared, so I put something together, and some offers and stuff. So yeah, I do, but I'm not. I have used Zoom before, but I need to share my
Yep.
screen, I think.
Yeah, share screen. What we'll do is the offers you've got, we'll run through those first. So people have got some time to kind of get involved throughout your talk to take advantage of those.
Yeah. Well, I'll try and do a segment at the end for Q&A as well.
So in terms of your offers, do you want to go through those, or shall I run through those quickly?
I'll run through them because I've thought I'll add some more as well. So I've got a lease option guide. Many of you will know. A lot of you have already purchased that. So for the next however long you've got your fundraiser up for, in the next couple of weeks, I think you said. So for every one of those that we sell to anybody, we're going to donate £8 to the fund. And also, I'm going to shamelessly promote myself throughout this entire thing. Take the opportunity. So for every new YouTube subscriber I get for the next week, I'm going to donate £1 to the fund, up to £1,000. I don't want to go mad with it. And then with the what was the other one as well? I forgot. Is there any
Blue
that I've
Bricks?
not mentioned that I sent you last night?
About the new magazine.
That's the one, yeah. So we're gonna. I think I'll check with Caroline on that one, but I think we're gonna give a couple of subscriptions away for free as well to the new magazine that's launching in the next week. But we'll put details of it in the group because, as I say, my mind's completely gone blank. I got engrossed into Simon's presentation. So yeah, but I'll stick them all in the group. I'll communicate that with Alice.
Yeah, perfect. I'll post your YouTube channel in there now. I'll even unsubscribe now and resubscribe just to get a credit for the
NHS. Yeah, I'll accept it, but only this time. So what do we do? Do we just kick off? How do I share my screen? What do I need to do?
There should have a green button, share screen at the bottom, little
correct.
menu bar.
Perfect. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. So shall I just kick off then, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll mute my mic, turn my camera off, and then I'll jump back on at the end for some questions.
Yeah. All right. No problem. And I'll try and keep to time. As others clearly can't. So hi, a lot of you probably know who I am, or that's me being a little bit big-headed. Maybe you don't. So my name's Nathan. I've been an investor and entrepreneur now for a little over 12 years. So to some of you, that might seem like forever, and to a lot of you other oldies, that might seem like a drop in the ocean. But quickly before I start, I wanted to do a quick disclaimer, all compliance and all that. So obviously I'm not a financial advisor. Some of the things we talk about might kind of, brush quite close to the, to the line of that sort of stuff. But I'm not a financial advisor. Always, seek financial advice if you're going to do anything, essentially. But as I say, I'll shamelessly promote myself. So who am I? Why am I on this? Why has Josh invited me, despite it being last minute invitation, Josh? But yeah, so I'm an investor. As I say, I've been doing this for about 12 years now. My sort of day job is a private equity investor. So for those of you that don't know what that means, I invest in small businesses as a full-time job. I own a boutique finance private equity firm, which is essentially a company set up with the sole purpose of investing the money that I've made over time into various different things. So one of the things that Simon said before was talking about different asset classes. So I invest in lots of different asset classes. So things like businesses, property, lots of different things, really. A little bit of shares here and there. It's not really my bag, and I don't do any of the cryptocurrency crap. But yeah, I invest in lots of different asset classes. You've got to diversify, especially in a market like this. So I'm a private equity investor. I'm an entrepreneur. So I've set up businesses before. So again, those of you that know me well, business is my background. So several years ago, well, about 10 years ago, I started a business in the medical sector. So my background is in biochemistry. So I did that at university and did a gap year working for the NHS in research and development. That was over in Leeds at the LICAM, whatever it's called, with the university and the hospital. So I did a lot of research and my sector was, the thing that I did research in was ovarian cancer. So we looked at a lot of ways to essentially help prevent it, ways to help treat it. And, you know, I was working in this fantastic facility. It was brilliant. My boss was ace. Very, very, one of the most intelligent people, dangerously intelligent, but yeah, but that's beside the by. So I've got a background in medical. I've got a degree in molecular biology. And that's how I got into that, really. And I don't normally talk about this because it's not normally relevant, but just giving you a bit of background. And you know, I've got a passion for medicine and biochemistry because as a young child, I had a rare kidney illness, which meant I spent a lot of time in hospital and learned to appreciate the NHS. You know, like we should appreciate them today more now than ever. But that really gave me a sort of a standing in a professional environment. And when I went back to uni after my sandwich year, I started a business working with the NHS. I saw that many suppliers were not ripping the NHS off, but the NHS was spending an absolute fortune on ridiculous things. Again, this is very relevant. This is why I'm talking about it today. So, you know, they were spending a lot of money on such simple things that I knew that I could, you know, manufacture very, very, very cheaply. So I thought, look, there must be a gap in the market. As part of my job, I was in touch with procurement and people that buy for the NHS. So I thought maybe there's a bit of synergy there. So what I did was I started a business, and little did I know, I thought, well, I'll do it in something that's high turnover because, you know, I had an interest in business at that time as well. Back in school, I started the school's first newspaper, which is quite relevant as well. But yeah, I had a passion for business. So I thought, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to save the NHS money. And that's what I did. So I started a business selling hand sanitizer because that was the highest turnover. One, you know, as you'd be surprised to learn, one of the most expensive things they were spending money on. So I thought, well, how can I do this? How can I help them? So I've visited lots of different suppliers, lots of different chemical companies, and we put together this plan. And I don't know if any of you know much about working with the NHS, but it's notoriously difficult. Due diligence is, you know, talking about it lightly, what the NHS did to us was, you know, it was quite invasive. But yeah, so we set up this business. We got all our ducks in a row. And I bid on a contract, you know, using the language that I'd learned working in the NHS. And it worked with flying colours, basically. We won a £39 million contract, and I was like, right, this is a bit odd. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do now. Obviously got through all the checks and stuff. We were one of the first small businesses ever to sell to the NHS on this sort of scale. So we were pretty much trailblazers at that time. I thought, right, I need to find some money and I need to find it quickly. Other words, you know, I'm going to get egg on my face. So I went to some investors, raised £250,000 of investment, which is enough to get started, and went about supplying the NHS with different supplies. That grew to gloves, PPE, of all things. You know, I do still wish I had this business, but unfortunately I don't anymore. I sold it, but we did very well. And, you know, I went through the whole rigmarole of finding investors, growing the business, but it was very much a job. Despite me owning the majority of the company, it was still very much a job. I had a board of directors, I had investors that I had to appease, and all that was very, very difficult. I found it very difficult because, you know, I wasn't growing the business as fast as they wanted. The NHS is a very slow beast normally. very difficult to work with. And, I got into some issues, some arguments with the investors, and they sacked me from my company. They gave me leave with pay, garden leave. And, I was very distraught. I was very angry. And, I was like, I'm trying my very best here. These guys worked in retail, oil, very fast moving, high profit businesses. So they didn't especially understand my business. Probably my fault for bringing them on board. But one of the things I did was to raise money, essentially scraping money together, friends, family, banks, loans, everything, to buy these investors out, which I did. And I got a disgustingly, horribly massive loan to pay these people off, a loan that I actually finished paying off, I think, at the end of last year, actually. So I just check some Facebook messages, see what people are saying. Put your comments in there, guys, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. I've got a stopwatch here to make sure I stay to time, about 6 minutes per slide. So if anybody notices I'm going over, comment. But the business worked out in the end. I exited it. I sold it to a chemical supplier. So one of our suppliers bought my company from me for a lot of money. A lot of that money went to pay things off, but I made quite a decent pot from that, which allowed me to get more into property. I had been investing in property during that time. During that time, I'd been investing in property, but very traditionally, I'd save up a deposit. It'd typically take me 4 or 5 months to save a deposit, buy a house, another 4 or 5 months, save a deposit, buy a house. I was very much in the business, so I didn't really have the time. But when I sold that business, I was very bored, so I became a project management consultant, freelance, helped other businesses do the same, helped other businesses get into the NHS, because it's obviously very difficult to sell to the NHS, but those are the skills that I had, I still have. So I help people get into the NHS, and I did that for a couple of years, got bored, and then kind of noticed all this online community with property, and I thought, well, I'm going to get into property a bit more, and I became a full-time, I say full-time property investor. I did it the majority of my time. I still work in my investment business, but property probably takes up about a good 70% of my time. So I did that pretty much for a while, and developed a portfolio, learned about lease options a few years ago, and started implementing that, and grew my portfolio massively. Obviously, you can understand creative strategies. I wasn't using them before, and as soon as I did, it trebled the size of my portfolio. I think it now stands at about 3 or 4 million quid, something like that. It's again, seems a lot to some, probably not a lot to others, but for me, it's an achievement, and I'm proud of it. So I'm a landlord as well. So I tend to very rarely flip properties. In fact, I've never sold a property I've bought, actually, come to think. I'm about to, or at least I was, but I'm a long-term investor. Like Simon talked about before, I invest for the long term. But yeah, so that's me in a bit of a nutshell. As I say, there's a link in the bottom corner of this video. So as I say, for every subscriber to my YouTube channel, I'm going to donate £1 to Joshua's fund, up to £1,000, and then I've got the other offers as well, which I'll stick in the comments at some point. So what am I talking about today? So purchase lease options, and so this is my, I guess, area of expertise. I've not bought a property other than on lease option now for about 2 years. So every acquisition I've done has been a lease option. Obviously, some of them I've turned over onto term debt, but every single initial acquisition I've made in property has been a lease option for the last 2 years. And I've not realised that until I've just said it, actually. And that's so it is a very good strategy to use, particularly in today's environment. So what is a lease option? Now, what I want to do today is try and change people's perception on what a lease option is, because a lot of people, they're thinking, negative equity, people can't sell, blah, blah, blah. And I want to change people's perspective on that. So I want people to understand that actually lease options can be a powerful tool for a lot of things. So probably when I say to you lease option, do you think property? Well, then that's very narrow-minded, because it's a very useful tool for a whole range of asset acquisitions in many different asset classes. So what is a lease option? So a lease option, simply put, is 3 agreements It's a lease agreement, which is essentially you operating the asset. You're taking the asset on, and you're able to operate it as though it's your own. It's an option agreement, so the option to purchase that asset within a specific time frame. You've got the exclusive right to buy, is probably a better way to phrase it, for a set amount, which is, typically isn't relative to any particular variable. So that remains the same despite the value of the asset going up and down. What you can buy it for remains constant. And finally, a power of attorney, which is a simple document drafted by a solicitor, which allows you to do what you want to a property. So, for example, if I want to paint a wall or build an extension, I don't have to get on the phone to the landlord every 2 minutes to ask their permission. I'm going to be able to do that through a power of attorney. So a lease option, there's no real such thing as a lease option agreement. It's lots of different agreements used together creatively to secure and operate an asset. So what am I going to be talking about today? So it's about identifying lease options. It's about understanding really how they work. I've not I hesitate to say this, but I've not really met anybody yet who really is able to describe what a lease option is truly in detail. Simply because people just don't know the power of them, and how versatile they actually can be. But I'm going to open some of that up to you today, stuff I don't ever share for free. I'm going to go over today. So understanding how they work, deployment, knowing how to put them in place. And I've seen some horrific horror stories of people not doing it properly. I'll try and run over some of those case studies. I want to make sure we've got at least 5 or 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, because I know I've been bugged by people to make sure I have that slot. But yeah, so deploying them, understanding how to do them properly. So understanding, first of all, that we're looking for people, not property. If you're looking for property, how many lease options have you done? Probably not very many. If you just got your mindset in, right, I'm looking for properties, they need to do this, this, and this. It's understanding. So how it works, it's crucial to how these circumstances fit the circumstances you need, and understanding that there will be costs. So, there is no such thing as no money down. No such thing. No, it's impossible. It may not be your own money necessarily that you use, but there is no such thing as no money down. So we're going to get rid of that straight away before we move on. And finally, deployment, knowing how to engage solicitors, work with them, work with vendors, speak to agents, that'll maximize your chances of success, essentially. So I'm already halfway through. So yeah, where to find lease options. So I appreciate a lot of people say to me, well, if essentially you've got to look for people, not property, then there's not a convenient little tool on Rightmove or Zoopla or On the Market or any of these other platforms that allow you to, click distressed seller or, motivated buyer or whatever, motivated seller even. So you've got to look for certain red flags, and these red flags can be, they point towards those certain circumstances. So if I use Rightmove, and I don't particularly use it anymore, a lot of what I do is direct to vendor, but we'll go over this because it's worked for me in the past. So securing lease options through something like Rightmove, what I'm going to look for is properties that have been on the market for 6 months or more. So typically, if somebody's looking to sell, if it's not going to sell in 6 months, it's going to be a big struggle to sell it at all. So I look for properties that have been on the market for at least 6 months, typically longer, can be shorter. Again, depends on the circumstances. But these properties that are struggling to shift, we look for that. We also look for cash only or fast purchases. So these are typically there's various reasons why somebody would list a property as cash only. One of them could be that it's unmortgageable, but we'll run over that later. Another one could be that it's for to do the property quickly. These reasons for this may include a seller might be leaving the country in a week, imminent. It's very, very, very unlikely that any sort of deal will go through within a week. So some sort of pre-authorization needs to be put in place for that to happen. So a lease option is a great way for you to take that property on. Maybe it's a short-term lease option, something like 6 to 12 months, for you to take that on and secure it, take it off the market with a sort of a secured right to buy, essentially. So I also look for capital light refurbishment projects. So ones where the refurbishment is very easy and affordable for me to do, but perhaps is very complicated and expensive for the seller to do. So those are situations where you can say, well, look, I'll take this on and we'll do it, but we need to be able to do it in this certain way. Sorry for mumbling. I'm just checking Facebook and making sure I'm keeping to time, guys. So tired landlords wanting to offload properties. So this is the one where I did about just under 60 lease options last year, 60. Well, actually it was 58, but I say 60 because it sounds better. So I did 58 lease options in 2019. And the reason I did that sort of volume, probably about 60% of them I did from tired landlords. Now, again, this is me giving away a bit of a trick here. Tired landlords wanting to offload properties is my bread and butter at the moment. In fact, I've secured another lease option during lockdown because of a landlord I already had a pre-existing relationship with. So I've taken on yet another one of their properties on a lease option. So for me, that's very useful. It's one I've seen before, obviously. I mean, I'd be hesitant to get into a deal I've not seen the property, but because I know them, I've secured that lease option during lockdown, without leaving. I've not left the house in probably 3 weeks now. I'm going mad, but yeah. So tired landlords is fantastic. And again, let me say to you, securing 10 properties is the same effort and almost the same cost as securing one property. So why would you not leverage your time? Success equals leverage. Leverage equals success. You've got to leverage, otherwise you'll not go past the sort of the replacement salary mark. You want to smash through that ceiling. Really, to do that is leverage. Again, sellers that cannot achieve their desired asking price. So that, not necessarily negative equity. And there's a reason I've left negative equity off this list, because I avoid it like the plague. I do not want to do properties that are in negative equity. And I'll talk about that later if we have the time. But sellers that cannot achieve the desired asking price. So I had a seller quite a while ago, probably about a year ago now, actually, where it was a property in Scarborough. It was an 11-bed HMO, fully tenanted, and the guy was open to a lease option. So I went and saw it. It was on for 280k. I didn't do much research on the market, really. I wasn't very serious about this deal. I thought, okay, I'll go and see it. Did the desktop valuation. Turns out it's worth 190. So the guy's asking for nearly 100 grand more than what it's worth. So I go in and tell him this, and this place is riddled with damp. People are living in the basements. It's horrendous. Like, you'd sink 50, 60k into that and he wouldn't solve it. So I said to him, look, why is it like this? And his eyes roll into the back of his head. Essentially, he owed money on the mortgage. He had credit cards. He had a loan that he'd bought, I think, a Range Rover with, which was secured against the property. He couldn't sell for less than that. I mean, we didn't do the deal in the end because it wasn't as good as what I normally would do. But that's just to show, if it was maybe less, I might have been able to, pull together some sort of deal. So properties up for sale and for let at the same time. Now, this is one that might seem obvious, but to a lot of people, they don't think about this for whatever reason. But these people are screaming out for a lease option. They're happy to sell. They're happy to let. You're going to buy and you're going to rent it, essentially. But also, it's one of the key rules of lease options is they cannot need the money right away. Because if they need I'll rephrase that. They cannot need the whole proceeds of the property right away. Because if they do, then the lease option is not going to work, because you're trying to tell them you're not going to give it to them for quite some time. So if somebody's got a property up for sale, but it's also up for let at the same time, subconsciously that says to me, they're happy if they let it, which means they don't need the money from the sale. Because if you needed money from sale, why would you put property up for rent? Do you know what I mean? So it's a subtle little indicator as why somebody might be accepting to a lease option, because they're clearly happy to wait. I'm running out of time for this slide, so I can't go into that in too much detail. Unmortgageable properties, so the CCC test. So this is something I learned from one of my colleagues called Kevin. So if a property is unmortgageable, typically there's very limited ways to finance that property. I mean, bridging is one of them, but I've taken on unmortgageable properties on lease options because I can get through the door, I can do the work, I can add considerably, forcibly increase the value of the property, and then I can flip it. So, or, move it onto term debt, which is, bridging, buy to let, whatever. But what you need to do with an unmortgageable property is find out what's wrong with it, whether you can fix it, and whether you can afford to fix it. And typically things that make properties unmortgageable are usually quite easy to fix, like Japanese knotweed, for example. Admittedly, one of the more serious things, it's not that big of a deal. It really isn't, but it puts everybody else off. So you're in a category where if you're able to look at unmortgageable properties as a deal, then all of the mortgage dependent buyers in the market, which is probably 90% of the market, all fall away. So you're now only competing with cash buyers, and cash buyers never pay the full price, never. So if you can offer the full price, which you most probably could on a lease option, provided the uplift in value gives you the ability and flexibility to buy it, then, that's one thing you could go for. So what is the CCC test? So typically, if you can't cook in it, and you can't clean yourself in it, and you can't crap in it, then it's probably unmortgageable. So things like anything that makes it uninhabitable. If you can't walk through the door and live there, then it's unmortgageable. So, there could be big problems, it could be little problems, but it's one way that could, really work quite well. Another one is certain difficult probate sales, so death, divorce, and inheritance. People looking to set. This is not one I've never done any in this sort of area before, so I'm totally inexperienced. But it is an area I've seen colleagues of mine do very well in. And finally, repossessions at the right point are perfect for lease options, because a lot of people say to me, well, if I'm going to do a lease option and, I'm preying on the vulnerable who are going to be repossessed. Well, not necessarily, because what you're doing is you're preventing them losing their house, of which any deposit in there they'll lose. So, and you might be able to give them some money to move on. So repossessions at the right point, providing bank proceedings haven't started, is a great way to find a lease option. So online resources. So where do I look, essentially? So one of the ways I do sort of scouting for lease options, I don't use any online platforms, but these online platforms are very, very good. So, there's lots of resources available. There's lots of you need to approach searching for properties as a business, because that's what you're doing. If you want to quit your day job, you can't quit your day job with a hobby. You've got to have something which is going to provide you with sufficient cash flow to be able to live your life at the same quality that you are now, or more. And to do that, you need a business. A business is the only way to create cash flow that will sustain you financially as a person. Now, that can be a property business, in which case, why are you not approaching it as a business? Understanding that this is the way it works. And as the other speakers have said before, treating tenants as clients is probably the best way to think about it. You want to have a good product. So things like Gumtree, great resource. eBay is another good one. So some of the guys that I teach, some of the people we work with, we always have a bit of a laugh about this one. If you've got your house on eBay, you've got to be desperate. Open Rent's a good one. Now, normally these guys aren't selling, but it's direct to landlord. And if you remember, this is a numbers game, and automative sort of plug-in prevention permitting, you can just send mass messages on Open Rent and ask people if they're willing to sell as well as rent at some point. That's a good strategy. I've found lease options doing that. Rightmove, we've discussed some of that. So oldest listed, how long it's been on for, what are they asking, what's the reasons. And Zoopla's another good one, very good academic platform, got lots of good research. But you've got to market yourself as well. It's no good kind of just saying, I'm going to search online from my bedroom. It's a good place to start, and at the minute it's the only place you can start, but it is just that, it's a start. You're not going to do property deals unless you're out there speaking to people, getting contacts, growing your network, and essentially viewing properties. I mean, most estate agents won't let you offer on a property unless you physically viewed it. So, you've got to get out there. You won't find deals just sitting on Rightmove or eBay. So you've got to market yourself as well. So we don't use any We don't use Rightmove, Zoopla, any of them. We do marketing. We do targeted marketing. We do direct-to-vendor marketing. I also market my own personal brand, which helps as well. Deals come my way. You guys should do that too. But yeah, market yourself, as I say, as a business person, because that's what you are. You need to be able to market yourself to the right audience. These are all simple, very bog standard business principles. Who is your audience? Tired landlords. How do I reach them? I need to be in the places that they are relevant and are. What is that? Maybe it's industry relevant literature, maybe it's magazines, maybe it's business meetings, maybe it's RNLA meetings. You're not doing enough. 99% of the people watching this, you're probably not doing enough. There's so much you can do. I mean, you can keep yourself busy 25 hours a day if you really needed to. So you've got to do more. You've got to really put yourself out there shamelessly. I'm somebody that buys properties, but act professionally. Don't ever call yourself a property investor, because everybody's a property investor. You're a business person. You're looking to make a profit, which means the incentive to do a good job is very, very high. So work on that. Work on the way that you market yourself to other people. So estate agents, if you're going to start looking on Rightmove, then obviously you're going to be confronted the majority of the time with estate agents. And estate agents, very set in their ways. I very nearly invested in an estate agent a few months ago before all of this hit. And I really, sort of understood the minutiae of estate agents when I did that. And it put me off for life, essentially. I'm being perfectly honest. But it helps you understand how estate agencies work and how the sales side of things work, how the letting side of things work. It's very in-depth. It's not as simple as we take a property, we sell it, we get a commission. There's so much more to it. And this is a slide I want to spend the most time on, because this is the one that most people are going to find relevant. So you've got to stand out and be professional. And first of all, you've got to forget everything that you want, because nobody cares what you want. I don't care. Estate agents don't care. Property trainers don't care. Nobody cares. Everybody has to be driven by profit, okay? And estate agents are no different, okay? Now, whilst we can all work together collaboratively in win-win scenarios, and that's what we want to do. I mean, maybe saying that people don't care is taking it a bit far to the extreme. Of course, people care about each other, but you've got to remember that everybody has got their own motives, their own ways of working, and their own objectives and goals. And if you can't, it's called the law of reciprocity. You need to look it up. It's very, very critically important. Is the law of reciprocity, is where if you do something for somebody, they feel morally and socially obliged to do something for you. So by being kind, you're actually being selfish, really. By being kind, you're contributing to the success of your own goals. So if I'm going into an estate agency, I'm going to avoid amateurish language. If I'm saying, what's the ROI on this? Have you got any BMV deals? What's the yield? Blah, blah, blah. The first thing any typical agent will think is, this person's never bought a property in their entire life. The second thing they're going to think is, how do I get rid of this person so that I have more time speaking to investors that I know are going to buy? So avoid amateurish language. In fact, somebody told me a bit of an anecdote the other day that a lot of estate agents know when there's a property seminar being on, usually over a weekend, because on the Monday, they'll get lots of phone calls with lots of this sort of language. So typically they'll have like almost a Deadpool, not a Deadpool, like a raffle. Each estate agent will write something on a piece of paper, HMO, BMV, service accommodation. They'll put it in a pot. They'll all put a fiver in each, and whichever term they hear first, whoever wrote that and put it in the pot, that estate agent gets all the cash. Estate agents are wise to this. They know, they understand this, silly language. An investor that they trust will swoop in, buy a property and leave. Okay, so you've got to know to keep it for what they want. You've got to work for what they want. They don't care what you want. They want to sell houses. They want to get commissions. They want completions, which is the magic word. Build a strong relationship. So these are people at the end of the day, so treat them like people. I see a lot of people speaking to estate agents as though they're not people, like very Wolf of Wall Street. That does not work. That will not work ever in any market ever. You've got to build a relationship. Go in and see them. You should see an estate agent 3 or 4 times in person, at least one of those times maybe with a gift or something token. before you even have any motive or any eye on any property. Otherwise, how are you going to, how are you going to build a relationship? If you're going to be an investor that wants creative deals, you're going to have to understand what they want first. So build a strong relationship, educate and compensate. I always compensate my agents for their time. If I go to an estate agent and I say, I want to talk to you about this creative way that I buy property, they're going to be like, oh, I'm busy. Do you know what I mean? You've got to, so I typically say to them, look, for an hour of your time, I'll give you 50, £100. Can I tell you what I look for? Because it's not, you'll probably not have heard of how this works before. And they probably won't have lease options. Who knows what that is? So go in, speak to them, educate them, compensate them. Again, it's contributing towards their goals. Okay. But what does an estate agent normally want? Well, they want to make money. They've got targets. They've got a boss breathing down their neck. What does an estate agent essentially do? They bank cash for their estate agency. That's the goal. So typically you might go into an estate agent and their target might be to bank 20 grand of cash that month, which means they've got to sell X number of properties. They've got to complete on X number of properties. And the way estate agents work is on a 3-month cycle. So most mortgages typically take 3 months to come to fruition and for the funds to be deployed. So if an agent's working in January, they're expecting none of that to complete while March. So if you can go in and say to an agent, look, we can make this a January completion, they're like, what? You've got to capture speak in their language, speak in ways that resonate with their goals, not your goals, because your goals will come if you help them meet their goals. Now, this might seem all fluffy and woo-woo, but it is 100% accurate. Ask any successful person. The estate agents they've done deals with, they haven't met them off the cuff, typically. To explain to them how it works, educate and compensate is a little term that I've come up with. Visit local or regional agents. So branch agents, they're not going to typically understand this. They may not be the authority at branch level for people to do these sorts of deals. So I typically stick with local agents or regional ones where all of their branches, they may only have 3 or 4 branches, so that the owner may actually work in the shop, in the business, or the directors or the managers have quite a lot of autonomy because the business owner may want their estate agency to passively pay them. So think about all these things. People don't go into debt. Estate agency is a business. They've got to make a profit. People might not like them, sometimes rightly so, but they're just trying to make money like the rest of us. So treat them with respect and ask them what they're trying to do. If I walk into an agent that I know really well, the first thing I see when I walk in, what's the targets this month then, guys? Oh, we've got to bank 15, 20 grand of cash. I'm like, perfect. So based on the fees that I normally pay you, that's, what, 3 lease options you need to do for me, like 5, 6 lease options you need to do from this month. And boom, they're on it. They're on the phones. Teach them, work with them, explain to them. Doing the first one's incredibly difficult, but once you have, they come flooding in. Trust me, they come flooding in. I typically pay the fees up front. So if I'm working with an agent, I might say to them, look, you've got a property that's on for 100K. You've got a 1%, commission rate. So you'll get £1,000 if you sell that property. If I give you £3,000 for you to secure it in this particular way with a right, an exclusive right to buy, I'm going to take over all the landlord duties of the property until I buy it. And then when I buy it, it will be for a set amount, which typically might be higher of an offer than what perhaps other people might, offer on the property. So I'll go in and I'll say these things and I'll pay you up front. So you've got to think, what are the 2 reasons why estate agents do not like creative strategies? Number 1, they're afraid that they don't understand it, therefore they're going to get cut out of the deal. Number 2, it may mean that they don't get their money, or they get their money late or on a deferred. Never use the word deferred with an estate agent or anything like that. It will put them off straight away. So how do you overcome those 2 obstacles? What I do is I'll say, I've got my eye on this property. I want it on a lease option. What am I going to do? I'll pay you £3,000 for it, and I'll pay you it now. Right? You may or may not secure it, but I'll pay you the money now. Right? So I'll pay them the money now, £3,000 in their client account. Remember, these guys are, they're regulated like deal sources. So they'll have a client account, client money insurance, protection, professional indemnity, the works. So your money's safe. So you'll pay it to them, maybe have some sort of written memorandum of, memorandum of agreement or whatever, just to make sure that money's extra safe with them. And you say, right, if you secure that property on lease option, you've banked that cash. And, and I'll also say, and once I've got it on lease option, I'll rent it back through your agency, so you'll get the 10%. So number one, they're getting 3 times the money they would ever be able to achieve by selling that property traditionally. Number two, I'm going to give them 10% management if they're a letting agent as well on letting that property out. So it'd be stupid for them not to try. And provided you've educated and compensated them, then they're on to a winner essentially. Hopefully, it's an agent that's got some wits about them, knows the vendor really well, because let's remember, estate agents own the market. Vendors put properties onto the market themselves, so they've got an inherent relationship with that agent. They trust them. They understand it's gospel what they say. So if you're paying the agent's essentially working for you. So you've kind of got the vendor in a captive market almost. But also, so you've overlaid the fear that they'll get cut out because they've got the money anyway, and you've paid them. So there's a psychological sort of game at play here. It's much harder to refund money than it is to have lost it by not earning it in the first place. So they don't want to refund that money. They want to bank it. So it's all about these tricks and stuff. Add multiple layers of incentive. And every time an estate agent does a deal with me, I'll go in and I'll reward everybody. Associate that with what you want. Now, I've never once in this entire transaction mentioned what my objectives are or what I want. I've put it entirely onto them. Okay, so they're working in a remit where I'm probably the only investor they've ever seen, which is actively talking to them about their own targets and what they need to achieve. So I'll go into an agent. I know Charlie likes a bit of chocolate. I'll bring some chocolate in when we complete on the lease option. I know Chris likes, some bubbly. I'll bring in some bubbly, give him that, and associate that. Who else goes in and buys gifts for estate agents? I mean, it's bonkers, especially when most people, don't typically like estate agents. So moving swiftly on, because I want to make sure we have a section. So I'll talk very briefly about networking with landlords. So it's about problem solving. It's about leveraging your time. It's about working with people to mitigate talking their language. So what are the issues with the landlord, especially in the current times? They want to sell a property. They might have, massive capital gains tax. They might have bought all these properties in the 80s for next to nothing. They're selling now, big profit, capital gains tax trigger. You might say, well, I can help you legitimately avoid the majority of your capital gains tax by deferring the purchases. But obviously we want to secure the whole portfolio, so we're going to need it all on an option, and then buying them over time, and then they can use their entire capital allowance against each property rather than against the whole property transaction as one transaction. So the portfolio market has been stagnant for a while, long before coronavirus. It's great for deferring capital gains tax, getting these on lease option. Takes away immediate responsibilities. So a lot of the landlords I've done lease option deals on their portfolio, these people have been in circumstances where they can't afford repairs. They've got imminent pressures. For example, one landlord had an environmental protection order on one of his properties, meant he was going to lose them all. So I took it on. He couldn't afford to do the work, couldn't scratch his ass with a penny. So I said, look, I'm going to take them all on. I'll take over all the responsibility. I'll pay for the work to be done in that property that's going to be, you're going to be sued by the local authority for. I'll sort it all out, and then I'll buy them all. And because he was in a situation, I agreed to buy all of those properties at his interest-only mortgage redemption value. So I was buying properties at 50, 55, 60% below market value. That's what I mean by talking about find people, not properties. Okay, so that's some of the reasons why you might use a lease option. Maybe they want to avoid unnecessary capital gains tax. I don't really have the time to go into this in much detail, but staggering those purchases allows you to do it, and also allows you to kind of help them out in their situation. So that's a very important thing to try and remember. So the legals, oh gosh, this is such a long slide. I'll try and pack as much in, guys. So the legals, so let's say you've got a lease option agreed, and the vendor's agreed to do a lease option with you. Then what do you need to look at? Well, the legals. Okay, so the legals are the most important part of the lease option. I've seen people do lease options without legals and lose 50, 60 grand's worth of equity that's rightfully theirs that they just lost because they've done it on the back of a fag packet. The main thing is use a solicitor every single time. Now, if I had to recommend a solicitor, I'd probably say Leslie Tao. She's got a great agent, a great legal firm that does lease options. I think it's Martin Wong. Apologies, I can't remember everybody's names. But yeah, they're great at doing lease options. So if you're not using a solicitor, don't talk to me because you will fail and it will fall apart, okay? Now, typically, you'll need to write off some costs for this. Now, any decent solicitor will do a lease option for between £600 and £800 per party. So you're looking at £2,000 to get us in legal fees to get a lease option over the line legally. And these include things like setting up the heads of terms. So having important clauses like clawback clauses, as Tarek said, shit hits the fan clauses. You need to put all these things in. So things like, moving the liability. So I'll always have a clause in my agreements that say, any pre-existing issues is the responsibility of the vendor, not me, in the lease option. So if there's damp, I find damp after I've signed the agreement, well, it's not my issue. Yes, I might be the one to pay to fix it, but I've got rights to knock that off the purchase price, the option price. Other clauses might be if a property doesn't reach the right value within a specific time frame, I get an automatic lease option extension. You've got to be creative, okay? So lease options to me are absolutely uncreative. They're not creative at all. How you deploy them and how you work with them is where you can get creative. Now, it helps with me being a business person, my background in business, but you needn't be a high-flying corporate business person. Just think outside the box. A lot of people have lease options, especially negative equity. It's one of the reasons I don't like negative equity. They never reach the value of the option price, therefore people can't buy them. So I had a clause that says if it doesn't we'll pay for a RICS valuation at XYZ date. If the value hasn't reached that amount, then I get an automatic extension of 3 years, something like that. And it provided they're happy to agree, then that's great. So engage solicitors, onboard a legal firm with extensive experience in working with lease options. Appoint 2 solicitors. You need 1 for the seller and you need 1 for you, the buyer. You've got to have 2. They can be from the same firm. I think the law was changed a couple of years ago, but they can be from the same firm, but you have to have 2 solicitors because the selling party has to have legal representation. Otherwise, this is defunct. The solicitor will put what's known as an RX1 restriction of sale on the land registry to show anybody that does due diligence that you've got that property on an option, and lots of different things. But as I say, guys, I'm running out of time, and I want to do a Q&A. So as you can see here, these are some pictures of some of the properties that I've done lease options on. I can run through some of them. So the first 2, if we're going from the top right-hand corner across and then across again, so the first 2 are part of a portfolio of 11 properties that I took on lease option. The next one along is a commercial property. I really wanted to talk about this in some detail because it's the one that I'll probably make the most money I've ever made on a property deal. But it's a commercial property, took it on lease option, change about the tenants, sort out the covenants and increase the value of the property by nearly 400%. The next one is 2 up, 2 down. The one right at the end it's 2 properties actually in Stoke-on-Trent that I've got on lease option. Fantastic area, lots of capital growth. The one in the middle at the bottom is a block of 4 flats, which I took on lease option. And then the one in the bottom left-hand corner is the one that had an environmental protection order. The council were going to sue the landlord because the tenants were living in undesirable conditions, made the property unmortgageable. So I took it on lease option, swooped in, sorted it, and I'm going to sell that property. Probably going to make about 35, 40K profit on that property. And it cost me, less than 600 quid to acquire it. So these are the sorts of things that you guys need to do. Lease options are very powerful. And I only wish I had more time, but if Josh, you're available, maybe we should do the last 5 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, that was super quick. Sorry, that was super quick.
No,
I wanted to cram all the information in there.
it's Simon's fault, isn't it? Really?
Well, it is, yeah. I'll punch him in the face when I see him. But yeah. So if you want to do, I think have we got 5 minutes of Q&A? Well, I think we can do
Yeah.
5 minutes of Q&A.
So first question, you kind of covered it, but how much is needed to invest in your first lease option?
So it depends on the lease option. So if it's one where 0 refurbs required, you can probably get away with 1,500 to £2,000 for the legals.
Yep, perfect. So what percentage below pre-COVID value are you offering? Are you, and also on the back of that, are you changing your offers now in
So
light of COVID?
yeah, so I'm going to look at the market. I also believe I'm 99% certain there's going to be a recession after this, simply because of the market indicators. So I'm going to look. I'm going to look at below at the very most, asking price, provided the the parameters of the lease option will allow me to get the value back. I mean, understandably, there's going to be a crash, but also asking prices are going to be lower anyway at the moment, because there's a lack of demand, because people aren't able to complete, down to fiscal policy and things like that. Banks are not lending because they're dealing with existing lending arrangements. So yeah, I might offer less, but effectively at the moment, Josh, the only way to buy a property is on a lease option. Unless you've got an agreement that's in the process, like it's gone to credit or something with a bank, then it's pretty much the only way, unless you do rent to rent. But then that's not buying, that's not ownership of the asset. So if you're looking to buy properties, then it's effectively, I dare to say, pretty much the only way at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So what issues do you encounter when trying to buy the lease option at the end, having a relationship with the owner?
So I know what this what this person's asking. So typically, mortgage companies won't lend on people. They like to do what's known as arm's length transactions. So they'll not lend to two people that have any kind of existing relationship, and that includes legal relations. That counts as a relationship, because of course, if you've done a 10-year lease option, you've known this person for 10 years. So that's clear. You can't beat around the bush. That's a relationship. So typically you'll have to bridge and then refinance. And this is what I talked about, that clause of trying to get properties to reach the value of your option price. Well, ideally, you need the value of the property to go 30% above the option price for you to be able to flip it with little to no deposit. But there are mortgage companies now that are understanding what lease options are, and I've seen mortgages be granted on lease options where the mortgage company knows it's a lease option. It's very much an emerging market, but you would never want to do a mortgage on a lease option anyway, because a mortgage lender provides money based on the purchase price, whereas the right sort of bridger will provide money based on the value. The two may be very different. If you've had a 10-year lease option, I've got lease options where the purchase price is 90k, but they're worth about 140 now. Why would I pay 25% of 90 when I buy it, when I could get 75% of 140 from a bridger and then refinance? So there's all these different considerations, but there are some mortgage lenders that will lend on lease options, but typically you need some other form of finance to get across that gap.
Well, perfect. That's been it's been a great session for the amount of time you had. Everyone's learned a lot. Fantastic feedback on that. And so if anyone who wants to get in touch, is YouTube the best way to go? That's where you document everything.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can still see my screen, but in the bottom right hand corner, that's the link to my YouTube. I've done it as a Bitly link. I know you guys are a fan of Bitly as well. I've done that so people can find it, and I give pretty much everything for free on there. Subscribe, guys. £1 for every subscriber.
Perfect. Thank you really much for your time.
No worries.
It's been fantastic. I've learned a lot from this, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Cheers, Josh. Thanks a lot, and thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for giving up your time on a Sunday. I'm off to make another coffee now because I'm knackered.
Cheers.
Cheers.